Welcome back to Reddit Echoes. Today's story comes from r/pro revenge, the kind of revenge that isn't loud, isn't rushed, and doesn't involve screaming matches or broken laws. This is the kind where someone stays patient, plays the long game, and waits until the other person destroys themselves. And trust me, the ending is worth it. Story 1. I took down our HOA dictator legally. When I moved into my suburban neighborhood, I genuinely thought I was buying peace and quiet. Trimmed lawns, polite nods, maybe the occasional block party. What I actually moved into was a petty dictatorship, and at the center of it was our HOA president, Todd. Todd was the kind of man who loved power, but absolutely hated accountability. He enforced the HOA rules like they were divine law, as long as they applied to other people. Leave your trash can out 1 minute past 9 a.m., $200 fine. Wrong shade of paint on your fence, another fine. But Todd's own house? Unpermitted structures. A fence taller than city code allowed. A yard that looked like zoning laws were more of a suggestion. Rules were rules, unless you were Todd. My personal breaking point came when I got fined $500 for my fence. The approved stain color was unavailable at the time, so I used the closest match. I had receipts, emails, proof that I tried to comply. I calmly explained everything and asked if there was any flexibility. Todd smirked, said, "Rules are rules," and walked away. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to fight him by yelling or arguing at meetings or ranting online. I was going to take him down, quietly, legally, and permanently. So I did something Todd never expected. I volunteered for the HOA board. I showed up as the eager, harmless, community-minded guy who just wanted to help out. And for 2 years, I played that role perfectly. I attended every meeting, I kept my mouth shut, I watched. I watched Todd bully other board members into silence. I watched him push votes through when only his allies were present. I watched paperwork from homeowners mysteriously disappear when it disagreed with him. And I took notes, lots of them. My original plan was simple. Wait out his term, then help fix the HOA from the inside. But then I noticed something else. The HOA fees were insanely high, much higher than similar neighborhoods nearby. And yet, the pool was closed half the summer. The landscaping looked neglected, common areas were falling apart. Todd loved bragging about how well he managed the HOA's finances, but none of it added up. So I asked for the budget. Todd laughed and told me not to worry, he had it under control. That's when I filed a formal request for the financial records. Under our HOA rules, he was legally required to provide them. Weeks passed, nothing. I started talking to neighbors. Turns out I wasn't the only one who had asked for financial transparency. Over a dozen homeowners had requested the budget over the years, all ignored. One neighbor claimed Todd used HOA funds to build a new patio. Another swore they'd seen Todd's kids using the community pool while it was supposedly closed for maintenance. At that point, this wasn't suspicion anymore. It was a pattern. I filed a formal complaint with the board, forcing Todd to finally hand over the records. And when he did, it was a disaster. Invoices missing, payments mislabeled, expenses that made absolutely no sense. There was a $115,000 landscaping fee paid to a company that didn't exist. Thousands spent on administrative costs with no explanation. So I cross-referenced everything. Bank statements, public records, contractor licenses, and then I found it. Todd wasn't just bad at managing money, he was stealing it. He was funneling HOA funds into his personal accounts, inflating contractor fees, pocketing the difference, and splitting profits with a buddy who conveniently handled most of the HOA's maintenance. I compiled everything into a detailed report, spreadsheets, documents, photos, and notarized statements from neighbors who'd seen Todd's behavior firsthand. Then, I waited. The annual HOA meeting was usually a boring formality. Barely anyone showed up. This time, I made sure they did. I spent weeks knocking on doors, explaining just enough to make people angry and curious. The night of the meeting, the room was packed. Todd started like he always did, complaining about how hard his job was, how much he sacrificed for the community. Then I stood up. I calmly asked him if he could explain a few discrepancies in the budget. Todd laughed nervously and said, "I don't think this is the time or place." I told him, "Actually, Todd, this is the perfect time." I handed out copies of my report. The room went silent.
Then people started reading. Whispering turned into shouting. Todd tried to regain control, but it was over. He started snapping, interrupting people, contradicting himself. Honestly, he did more damage in 5 minutes than I ever could. I called for a vote. By the end of the night, Todd was no longer HOA president. After that, we hired an independent auditor. They confirmed everything. Todd had embezzled over $50,000, mismanaged tens of thousands more, and committed multiple counts of fraud. We reported him to the police and filed a civil suit to recover the stolen funds. Todd had to sell his house to pay restitution and legal fees. His contractor buddy was exposed and banned from doing business in the county. Todd the name became a joke in the neighborhood. And the HOA, we rebuilt it properly. Term limits, multiple signatures required for financial decisions, full transparency with online access to budgets and meeting notes. Today, the pool is open. The landscaping looks great. HOA fees are lower than ever. Todd moved to a neighboring town and, according to rumor, tried to join another HOA. Apparently, someone Googled his name. He didn't make it past introductions. Every time I walk past his old house, now owned by a genuinely lovely family, I smile. Justice wasn't just served, it was plated, garnished, and savored.
Story 2. I charged an entitlement fee and they paid it. This happened about 5 years ago, back when I was selling cars. It was a Saturday morning, just before lunch, and things were already going suspiciously well. I'd sold my first car of the day before 11, which any car salesperson will tell you is a very good omen. At my dealership, 3 sales in one day was called a hat trick. A hat trick came with a $150 bonus. I'd already earned some extra cash from perfect survey scores that morning, and my sale happened to be the first one of the day for the entire store, which meant another bonus. By noon, I was already $500 up, with a very real shot at doubling it. I remember thinking, yeah, this is going to be a good day. And that's exactly when the universe sent me them. The receptionist walked over to my desk and said, "Hey, OP, you're really good with weird customers, and weirdly angry customers." I sighed, put on my best customer service smile, and asked who we had. She pointed. A couple in their mid-50s, standing stiff, looking annoyed, already radiating that special kind of entitlement that tells you this interaction is going to be exhausting. I greeted them, offered coffee. They scoffed until they noticed our fancy cappuccino machine. Suddenly, the wife looked very interested. I told her to help herself, explained it was pretty intuitive, and sat down. The husband slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a printout from our website. "I want to purchase this truck," he said, "at the advertised price." I said, "Excellent. Let me just double check that it's still in stock." That's when the attitude arrived. "You don't know your own inventory?" he snapped. "That's very unprofessional." He turned to his wife and said, "Honey, he probably doesn't even have it. Looks like we wasted our time." The wife added, "This would never happen at Volvo." I apologized, out of habit, and calmly explained that we had 18 salespeople, over 600 cars, and sold around 250 vehicles a month. Inventory management was a full-time job. I checked the key tracker. The truck was there, so I went and pulled it around. In hindsight, I wish I'd studied the listing more closely. It would have saved me some pain. The moment we stepped outside, they exploded. "This is the wrong truck! This is the wrong truck! I told you buying domestic was a mistake!" I explained that this was the truck tied to the stock number they gave me. The husband laughed. "No, it isn't. The listing was for a white, long-bed King Ranch. This is a silver XLT. Then he added, "I get that reading is hard, but you'd think even a domestic car salesman could tell colors apart." At that point, I stopped smiling. I told him there was no such thing as a $30,000 King Ranch, and that while mistakes happen, I wasn't going to be insulted. He leaned back and said, "You have to honor the advertised price. It's the law. My wife's a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. We'll eat you alive." So I did what I always do. I checked the facts. Every word on the listing described an XLT. The window sticker link confirmed it. The only mistake was the website photo. I printed everything, including the disclaimer at the bottom of every listing, and spent 20 minutes explaining it while they hurled insults and legal threats.
At that point, I was ready to fire them as customers, but management wanted the sale. The general manager came out, looked at them once, and calmly explained that selling the truck at their demanded price would cost the dealership $66,000. There was still a $170,000 gap between reality and their expectations. They didn't care, so I offered them an alternative. We had the exact truck they wanted, one model year older, 21,000 miles, listed at $37,000. We took a test drive. The husband tried very hard to hide how excited he was. He failed. Management approved an even better price, $33,000. Still, the couple fixated on $30,000. That's when the husband said, "I want to know what you paid for it, and then we'll negotiate from there." I told him no. He said, "We don't give a damn about you. We want a great price. Do better." I told him they already had a great price. Then he crossed the line. "I wouldn't care less if your baby lives or dies," he said. "Take $11,000 off or we're done." That was it. I told him to get out of my office. He said he was buying a truck. I told him he absolutely wasn't. I physically escorted them out of the building. When I explained what he'd said to management, suddenly we were all on the same side. About 20 minutes later, the husband called back. He complained about how he'd been treated, and then he said he still wanted the truck. My manager put him on hold and asked me what I wanted to do. I told him to sell it, no negotiation, and to raise the price by $2,500. When the guy came back, he apologized. Badly. I processed his paperwork in silence. Then I slid the buyer's order across the desk. He stared at the price. "This is higher than before." "Yes, sir," I said. "Why?" I looked at him and said, "That's the price for how you treated people." We locked eyes, he picked up the pen, and he signed. I stayed professional through the delivery. Cold, polite, efficient. And here's the funny part. That man became my biggest source of referrals. He told everyone about the salesman who charged him what he called a butthole tax. And because he was such a notorious jerk, people came to me because of that story. Over the next year, I sold 7 cars to people he knew. And yes, I did get my hat trick that day. Now I'm curious what you think. Was this justice, or did it cross the line into something else? Let me know your take in the comments. And if you enjoy stories where actions actually have consequences, you're in the right place.